song. In the big categories of album, record, song, you are not nominated.
Oh, okay. It's this is good. This is fine.
Yeah. And it's very similar. Everything is like this. You know, it's so weird. I said
this is, you know what? Like, this is fine. This is. I just need to make a better record.
Well, Reputation is a great record.
No, I'm making a better record.
That was Taylor Swift in her Miss Americana documentary after learning that her album Reputation didn't get nominated for any Grammys. And when I first saw this clip, I'm like, girl, just because you didn't win a Grammy doesn't mean you made a bad album. But clearly awards are important to Taylor, especially Grammys, and collecting accolades is a goal of hers. So why am I talking about Taylor Swift? Well, let me bring in this other thing really quick. I saw a TikTok from a woman called Whitney Euland. We're actually mutuals now on TikTok, which is fun. She calls herself a fame coach. She teaches people who are famous or plan to become famous how to handle celebrity and use it as a resource, which I think is an interesting concept. This is what Whitney said that I found fascinating.
One difference between the people who are like at their peak and the people who are just getting started is not their talent, it's not their connections. It is their decision to take radical responsibility for everything in their lives. Like, almost to the point that, like, we would probably look at it and be like, no, that's not your fault. Don't blame yourself for that. Like, or, you know, I feel like culture would look at things and be like, that's victim blaming or whatever. But the people who create massive, massive results, whether that is in their fame or in their success, in their money, those people, literally, no matter what the fuck happens to them, they look at it from a space of like, how can I take responsibility for this? What was my part in this? And how can I decide that that is never happening again? They don't get victim-y, they don't blame themselves. They don't like, you know, think, woe is me. They literally just take as it comes and say, okay, how am I fixing that? That's the level of self-concept that you have to have in order to create massive results. Something is not going your way, when doubt comes in, when fear comes in, when, you know, something unexpected happens, is how is this happening for me? How could this be working in my favor? And how can I be the solution? If you're willing to see your part in everything, then you are going to feel so much more empowered to then go and make changes. Celebrities believe that no one and nothing in their reality has the choice to respond to them in any way other than what they are expecting and allowing. You have to believe in yourself that deeply in order to become a celebrity.
I just love how she framed it, and this idea of radical responsibility, this idea that you need to take control of your life. I know that people may be really resistant to this idea of radical responsibility and taking responsibility for things even when they're not their fault. And, you know, I'll talk about that a little more in a second, but I felt empowered by this perspective. And I also immediately thought of Taylor Swift, one of the most successful pop stars ever. I do believe that she is someone who is very hard on herself. She takes her work very seriously, and she takes responsibility for every single thing that happens in her career. And she wants to be able to control as much of it as she can. And that is ultimately the key to her success, having direction, making things happen. And that comes with taking on the responsibility when things go wrong, and things go wrong when you are dealing with such a massive scale of a career like she is. She said and done things since this documentary that make me think that she does take personal responsibility for every single thing in her career. So take, for example, what happened when the Eras Tour went to Brazil in the fall of 2023. It was very hot. One report said that the heat index was about 138 degrees Fahrenheit, which means that's how hot it felt. This is from the Washington Post. The stadium felt to many like an oven. Some said event staff made them ditch their water bottles, fans, and umbrellas at the gates. Metal sheets covered parts of the ground in the $400 VIP section, burning some people who tried to sit on them. Stifling air and growing throngs made it hard to breathe. Some people had to pay $2 for a small cup of water, while others found themselves stuck in crowds too dense for vendors to reach. So clearly the conditions were really dangerous. There are many videos of Taylor pausing the show, making sure people got water, or directing people, whether it was venue staff or her own people, to hand out water to folks she saw needed it. Tragically, one of Taylor's fans, who was present at a concert in Brazil, died as a result of cardiac arrest that was exacerbated by the heat. Taylor posted an Instagram story that said she was very upset about what happened, so to the point where she doesn't think that she could talk about it if someone asked. And she went on to dedicate a song where she notably changed the lyrics from "every single thing to come has turned into ashes" to "every single thing I touch has turned into ashes." And that to me suggests that she was really beating herself up over what happened. There's another situation that also makes me think that she takes radical responsibility for things, where in Philadelphia during her concert, she yelled from the stage at a security guard who she saw was giving some concert goers a hard time. And going forward, there were signs reminding security that Taylor likes her fans. Like, don't be mean to her fans. Even though these security guards were not her people, they usually belong to the venue. She wanted them to know how she expects them to treat her fans. That's what I mean when I say radical responsibility. Some other celebrities might just say, it's not my fault this random security guard did that, whatever, that's not a reflection of me. Taylor doesn't seem to think that way from the evidence I'm seeing. Why are we talking about this? What can we learn from this? It comes down to what Whitney said in her video, that radical responsibility, taking control of situations, even if something went wrong that you had no part in, such as the heat or a security guard you didn't hire going rogue, trying everything you can to make the situation better is always going to yield more fruit than saying, it wasn't my fault, it was their fault, it was that guy, it was this, it was that. Like, that is never going to lead to the success you're looking for if that is your goal. So what is radical responsibility? Before I get into it, let me just introduce myself really quickly. My name is Charlotte. I make content about how to be a better human, how to just improve and grow in life. And if that sounds like your cup of tea, please consider subscribing or commenting to let me know you are here and what you think of the video. I really appreciate you being here. And I just wanted to remind you that I would love your support, because I know I forget to hit subscribe sometimes, even though I've just binge watch a person's entire channel. It happens. I don't know. It's a brain thing. So thank you so much. I'm so grateful. Let's get into it. To me, radical responsibility means owning up to every single part of your life, even stuff that wasn't your fault or was out of your control. It's about looking at situations and really analyzing them and trying to figure out how you can avoid something that you didn't like happening again and how you can improve going forward. Ultimately, we could all just throw our hands up and be like, well, that wasn't my fault. I couldn't control that, X, Y, and Z. There are so many situations I can think of in my life where something unexpected happened that just sort of ruined things. At least things didn't go the way I wanted them to. And we can all just mope about it, or you can reflect and think, okay, how could I have been more prepared for this unexpected situation? Here are 3 questions to ask yourself when something doesn't quite go your way, so you can start reflecting on how maybe in the future you can avoid it. Number 1, what was your ideal outcome and what actually happened? Number 2, what was your part in it? What did you do or fail to do that ended up getting you the outcome that you got? And finally, number 3, how can you do things differently in the future to make sure that you get an outcome more closely aligned to the goal that you were looking for? This is all about mindset. The most effective way to go about life is to take ownership of the stuff you have control over, to acknowledge the stuff you don't, to be compassionate with yourself and the people around you because you're all just doing your best, but to understand that you can affect the outcome if you really do your best. Quite frankly, the hardest part, once you've mastered the skill of self-reflection, is not beating yourself up and actually doing the work and preparing. It sounds very simple, and yet people don't do it because it takes work. So we are on the internet, and that means it's time for some caveats. Because I don't control who gets to see this video. And I'm talking to a very specific person. I'm talking to someone who is open to what I'm saying. I'm talking to people who do like the idea of taking radical responsibility even for things that were not in their control. Some people are going to wince at that idea. And I talk a lot about dispelling victim mindset because that is something I had for most of my life. I was like, why is this always happening to me? Like, what is wrong with me? Like, why can't I do anything right? I am the worst. Like, that's victim mindset, my friends. It is not a fun way to live. Taking the whole radical responsibility route may seem unpleasant now, but it ultimately is lighter. And I know that seems contradictory, but it's not. Like, recognizing that you have more control than you realize right now is actually very empowering. Two caveats that I get a lot from people. The first one is the, mental illness argument. Like, I have XYZ mental illness or condition, so it's much harder for me to do what you're talking about. And the answer I will give you to that is, yeah. Yeah, it is. I am someone who has multiple diagnoses as well. And I can tell you that there is light at the end of the tunnel if you learn how to manage it. And I can't tell you how to do that. I am not a licensed medical professional. I do not have any sort of credentialing in psychology, theology, or therapy of any sort. So please take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt. This is all based on my experience, but I do think that having that sort of experience has been beneficial in my life. So I hope that whatever I'm saying here, you can find useful in some ways. But I don't want you to think that just because you have a mental illness doesn't mean that you can't engage in what I'm talking about. Like, you can. In fact, this is probably perfect for you. If, like, honestly. The other thing I get is there are people who have been abused. Like, you want them to take radical responsibility for their abuse. I have no sympathy for people who make this argument because you know damn well I'm not saying that. You just want to pick a fight. Okay? The examples I gave up top were examples that are more aligned with what I'm talking about. Like a security guard picking a fight at a concert. It's not Taylor's fault the security guard did that, but she took responsibility for it anyway, and she gave those girls extra tickets, and, she put up signs. Like, she did everything she could to make the situation better, to fix it, even though she didn't do it. That's what I'm talking about. If someone hurt you, if someone abused you, that's never your fault. But to add some nuance there is something to, if you did experience abuse, and if you did experience a really harmful situation or a traumatic situation, you can take those situations and learn from them. You can grow from the trauma. And sometimes people get really upset hearing that as well. They think that what you're saying is that you should be grateful for the bad thing that happened to you. You can choose to feel however you want to feel about it. I would not say I'm grateful for the traumatic experiences I've had in my life, such as my father dying at such a young age. What I am is grateful for the insight it provided me. I learned things that I don't think many people go through life learning, and if they do, they learn it at a much later age. And so I have the wisdom to know that if that bad thing hadn't happened to me, I would not be the person I am today, and I like who I am today. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, here is how to start taking radical responsibility for yourself and to actually achieve the results that you're looking for. There's a YouTuber by the name of Tam Core, and I think she's brilliant. She has so much wisdom for someone her age. I love one thing that she does. She has these two characters, Lola and Athena, where Lola is unenlightened and Athena is the enlightened one. And I think that was such a brilliant way to frame things, because ultimately the way you level up in life, the way you see the results that you're looking for, is by changing your mindset. And so Lola represents your past mindset, the limiting beliefs that you may have, the unenlightened, the ignorance. And Athena represents the shift of learning how to actually navigate your way through life with a healthy and proactive mindset. So I've been inspired by her idea. I'm going to give her credit, and I'm going to name my young women Sophia and Agatha. Here is a situation that both Sophia and Agatha are put in separately. This is a parallel universe string theory sort of situation. And let's see how each of them handle things. Let's start with Agatha. Agatha works as an account manager for a marketing agency, and she has a very important client. Now, this client has worked with the firm before, but the client worked with a different team. The client signed on for a new campaign, but at the last minute, she called up Agatha's boss and was like, hey, I didn't really like the results of my last teaming up with you guys, and I think I'm going to go with a different agency. And the boss tells Agatha, and Agatha does not react well. Agatha's angry, she's frustrated, she goes on a rampage, ranting and raving to anyone at the office who will listen to her. She immediately starts looking for external factors to blame for the situation. She takes on a victim mindset. She's like, this is unfair, why does this always happen to me? Like, she is angry. She blames the client, she thinks they're being unreasonable, she blames the unfavorable market conditions for losing such a campaign. So off the bat, she is reactive. She goes on to blame others and blaming her coworkers. She sends a scathing email to a team member of the other team that the client said she had a bad experience on. She criticizes their work. She tells them, look what you did. You lost us a client. Why did you, like, how could you? She calls them incompetent, like really ruining her relationship with this team member. The client even offered feedback for why they didn't like the previous campaign, and Agatha refuses to take it. She says it's baseless and a waste of her time to listen to. So now going forward, Agatha is in a bad mood for weeks, and it affects her performance in other areas at her job, and people are getting sick of her complaining and constantly being in a bad mood, and they don't want to deal with her anymore. So she has ruined relationships because of what happened. Now, was Agatha losing the campaign her fault? No. And no one reasonable at the office would think it is. And yet they all have a negative opinion of Agatha now because of how she handled the situation. So now let's take a look at how Sophia might handle this situation. Her boss calls her in and says, hey, look, the client did not like the previous campaign and she decided to go with someone else. And Sophia's upset. She's been working on preparing for this, and then it's all of a sudden canceled, and she had no idea this would happen, and it wasn't her fault. She takes a moment to feel her feelings, and then she reins it in, and she's like, okay, what can I do now? The first thing Sophia does is she gets curious. She asks her boss, hey, what feedback did we get? Like, what exactly did the client say? And the boss gives the criticism that the client passed along to him, and Sophia takes that. She really analyzes it. She reaches out to the team members that worked with that client and asks them for their insight and what they think happened. And she learns that the client didn't really know what they wanted, and the team had to start to give them ideas of what they wanted, which made the project go much slower. It wasted some resources and money. And so there was just a lot of miscommunication happening. So Sophia actually writes up a document analyzing what went wrong, and she circulates it to the whole company. She did more work than she was expected to do, and they decide to have a meeting on it that Sophia leads, and she got a lot more exposure to the leadership at her company, which really appreciate her taking that extra initiative and taking responsibility for something that was absolutely not her fault. Sophia then reaches out to the client and says, hey, we totally understand what happened here. Would you be open to having another meeting? It would not cost you a single thing. We want to do a postmortem about what went wrong because we really appreciate your business and we want to see if we can regain your trust. And so she has that meeting. She brings in her boss. She brings in the former team that worked on this client previously. They discuss things. And ultimately, after getting that feedback and having that discussion, the client felt comfortable going with this agency again because she recognized how insightful Sophia was and how dedicated she was to doing a better job for them. In the end, Sophia got all of the credit for saving the day. And even if the client chose not to go with them, Sophia would have added value to her workplace and everyone was going to notice it. Let's talk about the key differences here between Sophia and Agatha's story. The first one is that Sophia was proactive and Agatha was reactive. And this is such an important mindset shift. When you live in a reactive mindset, you become the victim of your circumstances rather than going out and taking initiative to create change. When you shift that to a proactive mindset, you're able to see yourself as the creator of your reality. And that is when you get into problem solving mode. When you're reactive, you're just harping on the problem. And it's true that we can't control our immediate emotional reaction. That is almost visceral, but we can choose how to engage with those emotions. You feel it, you let it pass through your body because that's what emotions are. They're physical sensations in the body that then affect your thoughts. And that takes a lot of practice. And I would go on a limb and say that most people don't learn how to effectively feel their emotions in their lifetime, quite frankly, because we're never taught how. The other thing that Sophia did was she took this as a learning opportunity. She got curious about it and she reframed it as a positive thing. She found the silver lining. She was able to save the day, literally, by looking at it through that lens, rather than Agatha, who just wanted to be mad. Next, avoid the blame game. Playing the blame game in this situation really left Agatha making enemies and alienating people and preventing her from growing because it made her angry. Sophia approached the situation with an open mind, and she did learn that the team that was handling the client beforehand did everything well. It's just that there was miscommunications involved, and that is why the client was unsatisfied. And if Agatha had taken a step back and started with curiosity instead of blame, she would have learned that as well. Sophia focused on her role in the situation. She took ownership of the fact that she represents the company, even if she did not do what the client was upset about. And she took initiative. And she wanted to do what was best for her company. And ultimately, that paid off for her in the end. She got the credit for saving this client. Sophia also focused on constructive thinking. So instead of thinking like Agatha, which was, this is not my fault, like you can't blame me for this, which is very much not constructive. In fact, it can be harmful to morale. Sophia reframed the situation with, what can we learn from this? What can we do differently next time? And that keeps her mindset oriented towards solutions. So I'm gonna call it there, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here and sticking to the end. I am so grateful for you. Please consider leaving a comment so I know that you exist. I love hearing from all of you. If you want something else to watch, I recommend this video about how to romanticize your life realistically. Until the next one, bye.